I think I'll get a little pushback from Tony in particular. The SEC, the way this is playing out, and we really kind of grinded this down the last couple nights, is setting itself up to just flood that college football playoff field and somewhat legitimately. And because when I look at USC, Michigan, Iowa, put Nebraska to the side, they won this non-conference game against Cincinnati. I really don't think they're a good football team, a team that loses by 3 scores to Minnesota. I think they've got losses in their future. And obviously, Iowa's got to play Oregon. I'm not promoting them as a great football team, but those 3 teams are on the cut. And Washington, throw in Washington. They're on the place where obviously they got to win out. Most likely have to win out. They all have 2 losses. Those 3, the first 3 I mentioned, USC, Michigan, and Iowa, all lost their big non-conference game. And that's something that most of the SEC teams can say, hey, we took care of business outside the conference. If you're Texas A&M, Georgia still has to play Georgia Tech, etc. Most of them did. 11-4 outside the conference compared to 6-8 for the Big Ten. And that's caused this logjam for the SEC, where they may not grab the first 2 spots. Shoot, it could go to Ohio State and Indiana potentially. But after that, they're in a position to flood this playoff field.
Because that's what it looks like.
I'm sorry to throw in one more caveat to that. Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon seem to be shoo-ins, but if Oregon falters with a trip to Iowa, Washington, USC, then it's a little perilous after that.
I mean, maybe
Michigan's going to lose to Ohio State most likely. USC still has some tough games ahead.
Yeah. Oregon could get in at 9-3 as like the 11 seed maybe, or whoever. I don't know. This feels like a year where we'll have a 3-loss team as a at large, because and not as a conference champion that is considered a qualifier, automatic qualifier, because as you mentioned, a lot of those SEC teams have already had their second loss, and there'll be some quality there with a 3-loss team, and same with the ones you mentioned from the Big Ten too. So maybe 1 or 2 of them squeak in there. And in fact, as I looked back over 20 years of whatever it was, I did notice that from a number of years, there were 2 3-loss teams that would have been in the playoff under this format using previous seasons. So I think it is entirely possible that that's what's going to happen.
Well, I think the 5 SEC teams that have 0 loss or 1 loss, you can almost put them in right now, and that's including Vanderbilt, who might still lose at Texas and at Tennessee. Like, there could be one of those 3-loss teams. I do think there's going to be 3-loss teams because you've got to fill out the bracket. And I don't know that any of the 3-loss Big Ten teams would get in over the line of possible 3-loss SEC teams, because USC would have to win at Oregon to stay in the hunt. And I think, to me, they're the most likely. I don't even bother looking at Iowa for fear of my eyes. Michigan should lose against Ohio State. So, to me, USC is the only viable. And I haven't really looked at Washington. You look at their schedule, and they could do it with a home game or against Oregon. That would be, I think, USC and Washington have maybe the best and legitimate arguments to be in as a 2-loss team. And again, with so many, you're going to have to, as I said, you're going to fill up the bracket. So I think Washington with 2 losses, they're in because they'd have some good wins eventually. The SEC is just going to continue to beat each other up. So the teams that have 2 losses now, I don't know that. How many do you expect to stay at 2 losses? I think Tennessee could, without going through all of these schedules. I don't. You at some point, you can't expect. You've got you're 500 in the SEC, or you're 3-2, and you've got 3 or 4 games left. And are you going to win out? Probably not. But I do think you can go ahead and put in 5 right now, and 3 from the Big Ten is probably what I'm thinking right now. So Notre Dame is another one, provided they don't lose somewhere. And so what does that leave? 1 Big 12, 1 ACC, and then one group of 6 teams, if we did the math right.
I don't know if you guys have looked at this, but part of me does not want this to happen because I shouldn't say this, but I do want as many Big Ten teams to be in the field as possible. But I would love the chaos, and I would love to see the committee try to figure this out. You looked at this, Tony. So if, let's say, Georgia Tech beats Georgia, let's say Virginia and Georgia Tech, and neither one of these are great football teams by any stretch, especially Virginia, but their schedules are cake, especially Virginia's. Georgia Tech does have Georgia. Let's say they arrive at the ACC championship game, having run the table, and let's give the win to Virginia. They're 12-1. They win the ACC, obviously they're in. Georgia Tech's 12-1, having just lost the ACC championship game. Meanwhile, Miami and Louisville also do not have daunting schedules by any stretch. They run the table. You've got 12-1, 12-1, 11-1, 11-1, and most of us would agree that Miami's probably the best team, but they would be in 4th place with a tiebreaker loss to Louisville, in a sense, at 11-1. What does the committee do? They're not putting 4 ACC teams in the field.
No, absolutely not.
And you're making a great argument about the fact that there doesn't need to be a 3-loss team should things shake out. And you can reward teams that do well in conference play. And go back to like the Big 12 with if BYU loses in the Big 12 championship game, are they going to hold BYU out if they're undefeated at that point? That's not something. Generally, last year, if you made the conference championship game, you were rewarded for that if you had the numbers to back it up. And I'm trying to think with the Big 12, what was it last year? They let Arizona State in, but who did they play in the conference championship game that year? And so Iowa State just didn't have the resume.
3 losses. Yep.
Yeah, but if you're talking about Texas Tech versus BYU, and maybe they both have 1 loss, and BYU's loss came with the backup quarterback, which they're going to take into account, that may be a situation where the Big 12 gets 2. I believe Texas Tech and BYU still play in the regular season, so things have to shake out correctly to make all of this happen. But, the Big 12 is interesting. I'm not expecting much from Cincinnati, but boy, those numbers in the ACC are hard to ignore. But it will be interesting when we look at the rankings on Tuesday night, how many SEC teams you see ranked, especially at the bottom, when they're trying to prop up. Like, let's see where LSU is. Are they 25th so that the committee can prop up all of these? They got 14 ranked wins against opponents that this SEC team has. It's like, yeah, but it's SEC, it's LSU and it's whatever, Florida, and it's like, why is Florida 24th? And it gets a little cumbersome watching their rankings towards the bottom of the list.
I looked up the schedules for all the 6 SEC teams at the top, and the only game, there's only 3 games left between those 6 teams, and Texas is in all 3 of them. They have to play Vanderbilt at home this week. Then they're off a week. Then they're at Georgia, which they play twice last year. Does that sound right? And then Arkansas at home. Nobody cares. And then on the Friday, Black Friday, they play Texas A&M at home. So, I mean, they're the wild card in this whole thing, and they can't lose another game, because if they lose another game, they'll have 3 losses and will, be looking up at trying to get into the playoff as opposed to having its spot. So they could really shake this whole thing up and make it much.
Whoops. I don't know if Steve had intended.
My dog started barking.
There we go. I got you. Steve, I'm gonna stand up for Arkansas a little bit here. They have lost every game by 1 score. They have been like in the red zone in multiple of those games to win the game against Ole Miss, against
like 45-42 against
Tennessee.
A&M, and we
Yes.
think A&M is God's gift of football.
They
You ain't
lost to
seen
Tennessee
Ohio
by a
State
field
or
goal.
Indiana play a shit team like that 45-42. I mean, give me a break. I mean, whatever. It just means more.
Yeah, so that's that
I
is
loved all the jokes at Brian Kelly's expense this week. A lot of them very poor taste, but you can figure where I'm going with that. That
yes.
Eesh.
Yeah, can you imagine our 4 conference champions being Indiana, Cincinnati, Texas A&M, and Virginia?
Oh, Paul, there's no good teams in this playoff.
I mean,
they're all 11-1 or 12-0. Why aren't they good teams?
Thank
They
NIL.
ain't good teams.
Like getting everybody back on the same parity has made some interesting brackets, and I don't think any of us expect that bracket, but the fact that it's possible in November, I think is great. And that's one of the reasons I like the expansion of the playoffs, is because we're talking about these sorts of things rather than we're already dismissing all of the Iowa or USC or whatever, like the SEC teams. Like these are already teams being dismissed, and now we're like, well, perhaps they will host a playoff game, and maybe Ohio State will host a playoff game against this team or that team. So I like that the fact that there's so many more options for so many more teams.
Oh, I love scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
I love scenarios. I love the last weekend of the baseball season. I love the last weekend of the NFL season. Tony, who do you think, and I'll ask you as well, Steve, who do you think is presuming you're on board with Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon, the 4th best team in the Big Ten, and or the team that's got the opportunity or the best opportunity to make a 4th bid from the Big Ten?
Boy, that's a great question. Is it the team that is barely on the screen there? Is it Illinois as the 4th best team in the Big Ten? Because I can't give it to Iowa because of Mark Gronowski's passing.
Really? You think Illinois?
I don't know that there is a 4th best team. Because they're all very, very flawed. If I were to pick one of matchups in all of these scenarios, I might go USC, even knowing didn't Illinois just beat them? It's like, that's not important right now. And if you put all these teams in on a neutral field, I might take USC because I'd like to take Washington, but I saw how badly they looked against Michigan, which is not good for them. But I would just keep staring at me, and I don't like it.
Yeah, I'm trying not to be fooled by the athletes on the perimeter and the name brand and all that, but I tend to agree with David and Ed that I think USC is the 4th best team. Now watch Iowa go out there and beat them 16-13 in a few weeks.
They'd be the team that, if you're aside from Ohio State, the problems that they have with Michigan, if there were no labels on these teams, I think USC would be the team that poses the biggest threat to the most of these teams.
Iowa has scored more points than all of those teams in Big Ten play in 5 games, and they've all played 5. Iowa has more points scored than Washington, Nebraska, USC. Iowa has more points scored in 5 Big Ten. Well, they played one more game. Okay, apologies there. If USC can score 16 points, they got it. But they've scored more than Michigan, Minnesota, Nebraska, Washington.
That's a statement against the Big Ten rather than for Iowa.
Yeah, they got 38 against Rutgers, 37 against Wisconsin in a shutout, and 41 against Minnesota in what felt like a shutout.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the team that can shake this whole thing up. They're off this week, then home with Oregon on October the 8th and at USC on November the 15th. If they win those 2 games, then I think you almost, and they're going to beat Nebraska at the end because they always do. I mean, that's the Charlie Brown, Lucy Van
Yep.
Pelt game, as I always
Yep.
like to refer. I
9-1.
mean, Lucy has that thing set right there on, ready for Charlie to put that thing through the uprights, and then whoop, sorry, bro, up in the air, whoosh, 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 whoosh. Go Big Red, Not today, bro. Not today. So, yeah, Iowa's the team that can really shake this thing up. And, if they win those 2 games, they ought to be in the playoff probably. I mean, why not? I mean, their 2 losses would be Iowa State and Indiana. So, sure, why not?
I couldn't wait to get on here 2 Friday nights ago after Nebraska lost by 18 points to Minnesota and say, I do not want to hear anything else from Nebraska fans until you win a meaningful game. And I just put Minnesota in the meaningful game bucket for you. And you lost by 3 scores.
Yeah.
Beat someone before we have to hear about being a playoff contender and all this other business. Do not lose.
Enjoy the Music City Bowl
to ranked teams. Like, it's just unbearable.
Enjoy the Guaranteed Rate Bowl.